Yeah, just hold it. Just keep recording. Just keep recording. Welcome to TDTV, y'all. I'm your host, Brian Hessen, and by popular demand, we're going to talk about gun control. In the past 2 decades, this is a unique problem that the United States is having compared to other developed countries. So based off the UN, there's a Human Development Index based off the country's GDP, their average happiness, the gun control ownership, just the laws and the corruption based on the government. And the United States, we rank in by the HDI, by the UN at 9th. I mean, we are a developed country. I mean, I think it's like Sweden, France, Britain, Switzerland, Norway, us, Germany, us. So there's no denying that we are the developed country, but this is a unique problem for the United States. I mean, there's around 210 to 370 million guns that's circulating in the United States, with 5 million of those being ARs, AR-type weapons, semi-automatic rifles, the things that you see on the news that get sensationalized by our media. And according to the study by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, compared to the rest of the world in gun homicides, we rank 31st out of all the countries in the world. You might think that's not bad, but there's over 200 countries. We can't have that, y'all. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Also, too, we're 11 times more likely to have more mass shootings frequently. Not necessarily the lethality, but the frequency of mass shootings compared to other developed countries. When it comes to gun violence, anything to does with gun statistics in the United States, there's 2 different things. There's the mass shootings, and then there's just gun homicides. Those are 2 different animals. We gotta understand the difference between those 2. So the mass shootings, this is according to the Washington Post, that since 2017, there's been around 1,077 people that's died in a mass shooting that we've seen on the news that's been reported. Compared to the actual gun homicides, it's not that big when it comes to the overall statistics of the gun homicides and deaths by gun homicides. So we got to take that into account as well. Now, we understand that it's the media's job to report things, but it's being sensationalized to the point that we are creating laws, as arbitrary as they are or not, to defend against something that isn't a huge impact on deaths when it comes to gun homicides. But when it comes to the actual statistics about the mass shootings compared to gun homicides, what it's called by definition is the media dystopia. It's media dystopia. It's the media's job to sensationalize any, regardless if it's left or right. They will sensationalize it, and we gotta understand, we gotta take that into account when we're actually implementing real laws to things that may not actually have a huge effect on what's actually going on. Now, gun homicide is high. That is something that is true that we need to clear up, and we need to take care of that. Now, when it comes to mass shootings, we do, of course, don't get me wrong. However, the laws should be more based around the gun homicides and how to curb that, not necessarily just curbing mass shootings. I'm about to go into mass shootings, how we can curb that, regarding just mass shootings in schools. In my personal opinion, there needs to be more of a psychiatric evaluation, mental health tests. The kid, Nicholas Cruz, I mean, there was 36 tips by the FBI and the police department that they did nothing on. He was kicked out of school. I mean, all of these factors should have barred him from even buying a weapon. At the end of the day, even if we had stringent gun control laws in Florida, if we don't have anyone to enforce those, then it doesn't matter anyways. With the law, if you don't already know this, you need someone to enforce those laws to make them true to life, to actually affect people. So going into just mass shootings in general, like I said, psychiatric evaluations need to be far more stringent across the United States. This is something that we neglect, that we really need to actually touch base on. A lot of these mass shooters have shown symptoms or just conditions of being mentally unstable. Gun control is not going to fix that. Banning guns is not going to fix that. They are mentally unstable. We need to be able to pinpoint those people and get them the help that they need so they don't affect other people with their violence. We want to ban ARs. Like I said, we can't. It's logistically, it'd be a nightmare. But however, I do believe that we need special permits for semi-automatic rifles. Yes, we need permits for semi-automatic rifles. I don't think the average person should be able to buy that, especially an 18-year-old, buy it with minimum background checks and no waiting period. That's ridiculous. That shouldn't happen in any state. And I will say that banning high-capacity magazines is also something that we need to look into. We don't need 30-round magazines or more, or drums. Why do you need that? You don't need that to hunt. You don't need that to protect yourself. You can't carry that around and concealed. Like, that doesn't make any sense. It needs to be banned, or like I said, maybe a special permit to get those type of magazines. In my personal opinion, any firearm, handgun, shotgun, rifle, whatever, hunting rifle, it doesn't matter. I believe that it needs to be a federal law that they're all registered by the state. Now, the federal government says you had to register your weapons, but state by state basis, you don't have to. It's Texas, you don't have to. Florida actually came out with their new gun control law on Wednesday. Let me just quote this real quick for you. Florida lawmakers gave final passage to a $400 million gun control and school safety bill on Wednesday. The legislation, which passed the state senate on Monday and now heads to the governor, would raise the minimum wage to purchase any firearm to 21 from 18. Impose a 3-day waiting period on gun purchases, fund school police officers and mental health counselors, and allow local school districts and sheriffs to arm certain school personnel. It would also ban so-called bump stocks, which make guns fire faster and give law enforcement more power to commit people deemed a threat. But that's just mass shootings. Like I said, mass shootings are actually a small point of gun homicides. Gun homicides is a huge other animal that we need to fix as a country. What people don't realize, actually, I know you want to ban these ARs, these semi-automatic rifles, yada yada yada, but most gun homicides are with a handgun. We gotta understand that. Handguns can be concealed, and there's more handguns than there are rifles that are circulating in the United States. So, what can we do with places like Chicago? Chicago, in some areas, not every part of Chicago, but there's in big cities we will have this, high poverty areas, in the hood, in the ghetto. I mean, there's more crime, obviously, and there's a strong correlation between poverty and crime. We gotta understand that. So if there's a higher correlation between those two factors, and there's an easy access to guns. Now, I'm not saying guns make people commit crimes, but it makes those crimes more lethal, and that's what we need to look at. And I get it. A lot of people say that that's the argument that Chicago has strict gun laws and there's a high gun homicide rate. It's the gun capital of the world, as a lot of people say, which is true. It is a lot of gun homicide in that city, and they have stringent gun laws. But this is a lot of people don't understand. Is I actually looked a little bit into it, and there's an FBI report. And let me read this FBI report to you real quick. Roughly 60% of guns used in crimes in Illinois were from out of state. The overwhelming number of those guns flow into Illinois from states that have much less restrictive gun laws. Most of those out-of-state guns came from Indiana, which is right next to Illinois. Second place goes to Mississippi, and the third goes to Wisconsin. Illinois does not require registration of guns, which is a huge part. It does not license or regulate gun dealers, doesn't limit how many guns can be sold at one time. It does not require background searches on gun sales that are not conducted at a gun show. And guys, I understand that a lot of vendors are scratched off on these guns. They're criminals. If they're going to get the guns to get involved in any type of gang activity, or rob a liquor store or rob whatever, it doesn't matter. I get it. They're criminals, but it's not necessarily that they're criminals obtaining these guns. It's how easy they're obtaining these guns. A 2015 study at the University of Chicago suggested that only 11% of guns involved in crimes in Chicago were purchased through federally licensed gun dealers, which require background checks. In 2014, the Chicago police reported that roughly 60% of guns used and recovered from crime scenes between 2009 and 2013 were purchased outside of Illinois. We need to understand exactly why, there's high gun homicides, while we're having mass shootings. Please be really, really honest with yourself. How bad do you actually need that semi-automatic rifle? Do you need to protect yourself? According to a lot of articles that I read, that a shotgun is more viable for house defense than an AR-15. I go back to the Second Amendment. We don't want our freedoms infringed upon by a rogue, tyrannical regime. That's the whole point of the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And I 100% agree. Except we're not really looking at one part. A well-regulated militia. Now, if you believe in two different things, if you think the well-regulated militia is just the people, then you know what we're not upholding? A well-regulated part. it's not being well regulated if 60% of crimes involving a gun are crossing state lines and obtaining a gun and coming back into a city and committing crimes in a stringent gun law city. That's not being well regulated. Being 31st in gun homicides in the developed world is not well regulated. Having 11 times more likely to have a mass shooting compared to other developed countries is not well regulated. So we're not even upholding that part of the Second Amendment. Now, this is what I think the Second Amendment means. That each individual state funded, should have an entity that's separate from the National Guard, consisting of the people of that state that form a militia that is well regulated, that is well armed against any type of tyrannical rogue military coup. And I just want to expand on what I mean by militia, and let me read off the definition of militia for you. A part of an organized armed force of a country liable to call only an emergency, or a body of citizens organized for military service. So that's what I mean as a separate entity from a National Guard or the police department that's called in an emergency of, say, a rogue tyrannical military coup that's imposing itself on the freedoms of the United States and its citizens. And when it comes to possibly circumventing the special permit of the AR that I mentioned, that could be something that we could do in the future when it comes to AR-15s or any semi-automatic rifles, is that if you register with your state militia, then you can register with that weapon. You can have one of those weapons that's a service weapon of that militia. And that's what I mean by that, and how a well-regulated militia is separate from the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed in the Second Amendment. It's gonna happen again. There's gonna be another mass shooting. Gun homicides are gonna continue. So we need to do something. We need to understand what the Second Amendment is. We need to take in every evidence, every fact that we can, every statistic, and really devise some sort of plan to protect our people while keeping our right to bear arms. I'll catch you guys later.